Welcome to day 3 of the Parent Practicum. Thank you so much for sticking with us, and I really appreciate just the time that it takes from your family and from your busy summer. I know Lisa's been a speaker for years, as have I, and we love meeting you, and so it's kind of sad for me that all these people get to hear me and I don't get to hear you. But thanks for being here, Lisa.
Thanks for letting me come.
You're so welcome. Okay, I'm going to let you start.
All right, so for day 3, what we want to know from you, Leigh, is where does math take a student? Now you know Buzz Lightyear has already answered this question for you.
And
to infinity and beyond.
That's
so
right.
What would you say?
I think that's the perfect answer, to infinity and beyond.
Who knew Buzz was so profound?
Right. Well, you know, one of the things is, as Christians, we love the Alpha and Omega, and the whole idea of infinity is important there. So one of the things that I really regret is when I was getting my engineering degree, the only graduate course I took was a whole semester study on 2 numbers, 0 and infinity. And I was not a Christian. And that's one of my only, when people, if you ask me what I regret, I would say not being a Christian while I took that course.
Sure.
Because I just know how much I would have met the Lord and seen things that, But it's not too late, is it?
No, it's not.
So I'm so excited about that, because that's one of the things with Mandala Fellowship this coming year. Because the unity in a circle, 0, is such an important concept. So we will be in math, so we will be looking at that.
Awesome.
So it'll be great. But here's the thing that, all about math, I just love arithmetic, because it's a gateway to just knowing more of the Lord. We talked about the Trinity before. But the one thing that I hope my children learn from me is that we are made in God's image, and therefore we are to reflect back the things He loves. And I know He loves this world. He loves it so much He sent His only begotten Son to die for it. So I want to know the world really well. And one of the ways you learn about the world well is to always be looking for, how can I reflect back to Him, what He's done for us. And so one thing that's an interesting Christian concept is this whole idea of ex nihilo, that creation was made out of nothing. So think about this. What's the idea of 0 representing?
Nothing.
But as soon as you want to represent 0, you have to write something.
And now it's not nothing.
And now it's not nothing. It's something. We've just reflected Him again.
Wow.
So I want that to be the heart of what we're doing in everything, not just math.
Sure.
But math is a pretty easy gateway to finding ways to reflect what He's done. Think about, you love logic, right?
I do.
Remember all the logical propositions? You had to write the form out, and then you said what laws to use and what lines to use, and then you wrote to the next step, and you wrote the laws and the lines, and you wrote the step. That's exactly what you do in algebra.
Yes.
You write the equation, but what happened is we just teach the kids to write the steps. We don't make them do that second step that a logician does and write what laws allow you to do the steps. We need to change that for our pre-algebra and algebra students.
Right. That teaches them to understand what they are doing. So they're no longer just following a pattern, they are understanding the pattern. And it helps them create the pattern as they create these syllogisms and as they do logical proofs. It helps them to be creators using the laws that are already there.
That's right. And that word law, we have a lawgiver. So how can somebody who's a mathematician who has to follow law after law after law, and who knows those, right? He's got his PhD in math. How can he not know there's a lawgiver?
It's amazing. Yeah. That's a great mystery to me.
All by itself, right? So one of the things that are really important as a parent, as someone who just loves other human beings, even if I didn't have other children, is to always be reflecting Christ's image, right? And we can't do it all the time. There's no way, right? We fall all the time. But to have that as our goal. One of the things I like is this guy, Benjamin Zander. He's all over YouTube. He's a composer. And he's so discouraged by the field that he lives in, other composers and symphony conductors, because he says, they all quote these statistics, and only 3% of people like classical music. And so they're so discouraged. And he's like, what if you believed 100% of people like classical music? Wouldn't you walk differently, talk differently, act differently, assume everybody would love it? Well, that's my question then to parents is, what if we assumed for your kids actually liked math? Would you
Right.
talk about it from the beginning differently?
We would. We definitely would.
Yeah, and so just our words can change the emotions that we feel with attached to something. And so Benjamin Zander is really great in talking about how the best way to assess the folks around you that you're educating is how many of them have shining eyes. How many of them are just
Yes.
so delighted
Yes.
right, to look at you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to read to you something that I put shining eyes into Lisa.
It did. It's
And-
wonderful.
And because one of our concerns is the parent who says, well, you love math innately, or you have an engineering degree,
Right.
or you're an expert somehow. So this is from the Supper of the Lamb, written by Father Capon, who's a Episcopal priest. And he's writing a cookbook, okay? And he says, next, my qualifications. First, I'm an amateur. If that strikes you as disappointing, consider how much in error you are, and how the error is entirely of your own devising. At its root lies an objection to cookbooks written by non-professionals. It does not, however, apply here. Amateur and non-professional are not synonyms. The world may or may not need another cookbook, but it needs all the lovers, all the amateurs it can get. What's the root for amateur?
Amo.
To
To love.
I love, right? It is a gorgeous old place. He's talking about cooking. Food, full of clownish graces and beautiful drolleries, and it has enough textures, tastes, and smells. Food, right? Textures, tastes, and smells to keep us intrigued for more time than we have. Unfortunately, however, our response to its loveliness is not always delight. It is far more often than it should be, boredom. And that is not only odd to be bored with food, it's tragic. For boredom is not neutral, it's the fertilizing principle of unloveliness. In such a situation, the amateur, the lover, the man who thinks heedlessness a sin and boredom a heresy is just the man you need. More than that, whether you think you need him or not, he is a man who is bound by his love to speak. So let's relate that back to math. We're not experts, we're not professionals.
Right. But we are amateurs who love the mystery and the form of math. And I thought it was really interesting. This speaks not just to people who are determined to learn to love math, but also to people who already love math. Maybe you will discover that you don't love it as fully as you thought you did, because when you read this to me and I began to think about it, I realized I love to cook, but I don't love to cook like this guy loves to cook. I've never caressed an onion as I chopped it. And so maybe I don't love as fully as I could. So maybe even those of us who love math and the beauty of it don't appreciate it in its fullness yet.
And that would bring me to another point that specifically it relates to Saxon, but just math in general. We don't need to love math. We need to love our children.
Yes.
And we need to love our children in a way where we want them to love the Lord. And he wrote this world using order, and
Yes.
math is such a good way to find out what he meant.
Exactly.
And so because we love him and we love our children, think about that, we're amateur lovers of Christ. We're not experts. No one's paying us to do this. And we say we die for it.
Yes.
So being an amateur is okay. It's loving your children is what will make it so that you'll love the other things your children should love.
And one of the things that you said recently to me that really inspired me was that math is one of the ways that we can teach our children to know God in his fullness. Now, previously, I could not get behind the loving of math for its own sake. I'll just be honest. But you know what? Even if I had heard that as a non-math loving parent, I would have been able to get behind the idea of cultivating in my students a love for math if I thought it would help them know Christ in his fullness.
And so one of the problems is there's not a lot of books, leaders, teachers that help us to see that. And so one of the things I'd recommend is to go back and look at our quadrivium tapes of our math seminars.
Sure.
Read James Nichols' book, Mathematics is God Silent? And then this book that we're promoting this Practicum season is Stratford Caldecott's Beauty for Truth's Sake. It's a math book. These are the things that will help you learn to see how to love what you don't love.
Right.
Because lovers of those subjects
Yes.
have written those books. But I'll get back, and I actually want to close with this point, so we'll skip the why Saxon, because it makes the point, I think, best of all that we're talking about, and it's this. When my boys were little, we were at a recreation center, and I saw Mom in the corner studying a Saxon algebra book. And so homeschooling was still pretty new back then, so I went over and I asked her if she homeschooled, and she said yes. And I asked her, are you teaching your children Algebra 1? And she said no. She said, I am dying of cancer, and I don't know how long I have to live or how weak I will be as this disease progresses, and I want to be prepared to teach my children what they need to know to succeed and go on past me. And when she said that, it was just one of those times when the Spirit meets your soul. And I knew right then, I too am dying. And I want to be prepared all the time to give my children what they need when they need it. And so we as home educators have committed to this idea of reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's the basics.
Yep.
You mentioned at the very beginning this whole threeness tripod. Don't knock out one of those legs.
That's right. Take away your sturdiness.
Yeah, and in the completeness that's there. And so with that, I just really want to encourage you to think of all that you learned during this practicum. I'm sure it was incredibly overwhelming. I mean, 3 days of math for 6 hours a day, I know that it's a lot. But, continue to visit CC's website, classicalconversations.com, join a community, and when your children are in the challenge program, please do your best to be in every single math seminar. Even if you're only there for like half an hour because your other kids are in foundations. This conversation's been fun for Lisa and I.
It has.
Maybe it wasn't for you, I don't know, but I do know this. If once a week, when your kid's already in a math seminar, if you were there too, you would become better at math yourself.
And more excited by it.
It wouldn't cost you any more either.
That's right.
You're already there.
That's right.
So do it. Thank you so much for attending our parent practicum, and thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks.